You work harder, fall further behind. More choices, less happiness. Data promises truth, delivers lies. Mistakes haunt you. Optimism betrays you. Tonight, 5 paradoxes shatter everything you believe about success, satisfaction, and survival, and reveal the counterintuitive truths that actually work. If this resonates with you, a subscribe is appreciated, because understanding paradoxes might just be the edge you've been missing. Now let's begin. Friendship paradox. Why your friends always seem more successful than you. 3 in the morning. You wake up, anxiety crawling through your chest. You reach for your phone, a mistake you'll regret but can't resist. LinkedIn lights up your old college roommate just sold his company for $50 million. Facebook next, a former colleague just made vice president. Instagram, your golf buddy retired early, posting from a beach in Thailand. And you stuck in the same middle management position for 20 years. The next morning, you stare into the bathroom mirror and ask yourself the question that's been haunting you. Have I failed? Your wife asks why you're so quiet at breakfast. You force a smile and say nothing, because how do you admit that you feel like you're losing a race you didn't even know you were running? But here's the twist. You're not failing. Your brain is being deceived by mathematics. This is the friendship paradox, and it's one of the most counterintuitive truths about social networks and human connection. At its core, the paradox reveals something startling. On average, your friends have more friends than you do. How is this possible? It seems to defy logic, but the mathematics behind it are airtight, and the implications run deeper than you might imagine. The friendship paradox emerges from how social networks operate. People with lots of connections, the hubs of social networks appear everywhere. Think about it. If someone has 500 connections, they have 500 chances to show up in someone's feed. Meanwhile, someone with only 50 connections has just 50 chances. This mathematical quirk means that when you scroll through your social media, you're disproportionately exposed to the most connected, most visible people. You have 50 connections on LinkedIn, but among those 55 people have 500 connections each. These 5 individuals account for 70% of what you see every single day. Your brain processes this information and draws a conclusion. Everyone is more successful, wealthier, and happier than you are. This is the hub effect in action. CEOs, investors, influencers. They're the centers of vast networks. They're always present, always visible, creating the illusion that everyone is thriving. Let's walk through some real scenarios where this paradox plays out with devastating emotional consequences. Picture your 30th high school reunion. You walk into an elegant hotel ballroom. Everyone's dressed well, looking successful. One person talks about their yacht, another mentions their 3rd home. When it's your turn, you talk about your stable job. It sounds painfully boring in comparison. You drive home in silence. Your wife asks what's wrong, but you can't explain the hollowness in your chest. That night, you lie awake replaying conversations, wondering about the paths not taken. The next week, you avoid running into old classmates. The shame sits heavy. But here's what you don't know. The man who bragged about his yacht is drowning in debt, facing his 2nd divorce. The woman with 3 homes works 80 hours a week and hasn't seen her children in months. They shared 10% of their lives, the glossy surface, while hiding the 90% that's crumbling beneath. Now imagine Thanksgiving dinner with your extended family. Your younger brother pulls up in a brand new Tesla. Your nephew just got into Yale. Your son attends a normal public state school. Your elderly mother looks at you across the table and asks, "Why didn't you get promoted this year?" The question lands like a punch. You smile through gritted teeth, anger simmering just beneath the surface. After dinner, you sit alone in your car, staring into the darkness, questioning everything. But what you don't see, your brother took out a massive loan to buy that car just to impress people, and now he's drowning in monthly payments. Your nephew is miserable at Yale, crushed by pressure and anxiety, but the family only sees the prestige. Nobody talks about the truth behind the performance. Or consider your office. A colleague much younger just got promoted to director. You've been working hard for 2 decades and nobody seems to notice. In the board meeting, your suggestions are overlooked. You drive home, crack open a beer and sit in the dark. You ask yourself, am I even valuable anymore? But here's the reality: that young colleague is the CEO's kid, pure nepotism. Their actual work performance is mediocre at best. But they're visible in all the right moments, at all the right meetings. They've mastered the appearance of success without the substance. So what's really happening here? Let's break down the science. The mathematics of social networks follow what's called the power law. 20% of people hold 80% of the connections. LinkedIn's algorithm prioritizes posts with high engagement, which means the most connected people dominate your feed. Success stories spread 10 times faster than stories of struggle or failure. The human brain is wired to remember outliers, the exceptionally successful, while forgetting everyone else. This creates a deeply distorted perception of reality. From a psychological perspective, we're engaging in what researchers call social comparison, and we almost always compare upward, not downward. We look at people doing better and feel inadequate, while rarely looking at those facing greater struggles. This is compounded by confirmation bias. We selectively remember evidence that confirms our sense of inadequacy. At the peak of our careers, this pressure intensifies. If you haven't made it by now, when will you? But here's the truth. The midlife crisis isn't really about aging. It's about comparison. Research in public health uses the friendship paradox to predict behaviors like drinking and smoking, because we're influenced by the most visible people in our networks. In marketing, influencers wield disproportionate power precisely because of this effect. And perhaps most troubling, rates of depression and anxiety are at historic highs, driven in part by the relentless comparison machine of social media. So what can you do about it? First, recognize that your newsfeed is not reality. It's a highlight reel. The people you perceive as wildly successful are also carrying pain they never share. And here's something you probably haven't considered: you are someone else's hub. Someone is looking at your life with envy, wishing they had what you have. For concrete action, try deleting LinkedIn from your phone for 3 months as an experiment. Don't check social media first thing in the morning before work. Instead, focus on comparing yourself today to yourself yesterday. Keep a journal where you write down 3 ways you are better than you were last year. Finally, redefine what success means to you, not what social media says it should be. Enough money to live comfortably, enough health to enjoy life, enough love to feel connected. That's success. The friendship paradox reminds us of something crucial. Other people's lives are theater, not documentary. The only person you should compete with is who you were yesterday. A few years from now, when you look back, you'll regret all the time you spent comparing yourself to carefully curated illusions. So stop watching other people's lives. Start living your own. Paradox of choice. Why 50 options make you miserable, while 5 set you free? You're standing in the dairy aisle of the supermarket. 47 different types of milk stare back at you. Whole milk, 2%, 1% skim, organic, grass-fed, lactose-free, almond, oat, soy, coconut. 15 minutes pass. You're still standing there, hands trembling, as you hold 2 cartons, unable to decide. The person behind you glares with obvious irritation. You put both cartons back and walk out empty-handed, feeling like a failure over something as simple as milk. That evening, you spend 45 minutes scrolling through Netflix, unable to choose a single movie. Eventually, you just turn off the TV and go to bed feeling hollow and defeated. Here's the twist. This isn't your problem. This is the trap of freedom itself. This is the paradox of choice, and it reveals a counterintuitive truth about modern life. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to decide, and the less satisfied you feel with whatever you choose. It seems backward, doesn't it? We've been taught that freedom means having unlimited options, that more choices equal more happiness. But psychologist Barry Schwartz discovered something shocking in his research. In his classic jam experiment, he set up 2 tasting booths at a grocery store. Booth A displayed 24 varieties of jam. Booth B displayed only 6. The results were stunning. Booth A attracted more curious shoppers, but Booth B sold 10 times more jam. Why? Because when faced with too many options, people freeze. They become paralyzed by 3 powerful forces. Analysis paralysis, where your brain becomes overloaded and simply can't process all the information. Opportunity cost, where you're haunted by regret over what you didn't choose. And elevated expectations, where having many options creates the belief that somewhere out there exists the perfect choice, and anything less is failure. Let's walk through some real scenarios where this paradox destroys peace of mind and costs real money. Imagine you receive a notification from your company about retirement planning. Your 401k account has 63 different investment options. Each option comes with 40 pages of legal documentation filled with terms like diversification ratios, expense ratios, and risk tolerance matrices. You spend 3 weeks reading, and the more you read, the more confused you become. You call a financial advisor for help. They introduce 20 more options you hadn't even considered. You lie awake at night, terrified that choosing wrong will destroy your entire retirement. The deadline arrives. Overwhelmed and exhausted, you select the default option just to escape the pressure. 5 years later, you discover you've lost $200,000 because that default option had hidden fees and poor performance. But here's the real cost. It's not the money. It's the regret that eats at you every single day, wondering if you'd made a different choice. Would your life be different now? Now picture health insurance. Enrollment season, 23 different plans stare at you from the screen. Each has different deductibles, co-pays, and out-of-pocket maximums. Your wife has diabetes and needs expensive medication. Your son needs braces. You sit at your computer until 2 in the morning, building Excel spreadsheets, comparing numbers until your head spins. You choose the cheapest plan because you're afraid of wasting money. 6 months later, your wife needs surgery. The insurance doesn't cover it. You have to pay $15,000 out of pocket. The financial hit is devastating, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is the tension in your marriage. Your wife doesn't say anything, but you see the sadness in her eyes. She knows you chose to save money instead of protecting her health. That look haunts you. Or consider something simpler: buying a laptop. Your old one finally dies, and you need a replacement immediately. You go to Amazon. 847 search results. You spend 3 days reading reviews, comparing specifications, watching YouTube videos until midnight. Your son tells you to buy a Mac. Your co-worker swears by Dell. In the end, you buy an HP because it's on sale. The moment you get home, you immediately search, is HP better than Dell? Every time you use it, you wonder, would the Mac have been better? You're never 100% satisfied with your decision. The real cost here isn't the money you spent. It's the peace of mind you'll never have. So what's really happening in your brain? Let's break down the science. Your brain has a limited capacity for making decisions each day. This is called decision fatigue. After you exhaust this capacity, you either make terrible choices or you make no choice at all. This is why CEOs like Steve Jobs and Barack Obama wore the same outfit every day. They were preserving their decision-making energy for what truly mattered. Research has identified 2 types of people: maximizers and satisficers. Maximizers believe they must find the absolute best option in every situation. They're the ones reading hundreds of reviews before buying anything. Satisficers, on the other hand, look for an option that's good enough and move on. Studies show that satisficers are 40% happier than maximizers, despite often making objectively similar choices. The difference isn't in the outcome, it's in the mental torture maximizers put themselves through. From a broader cultural perspective, we've been sold a lie. The consumer economy has convinced us that more is always better, that having unlimited options is the pinnacle of freedom. There's a $4.5 trillion industry built on creating more choices. And the result? We're the most anxious, depressed, and dissatisfied generation in history. The paradox reveals that what we thought was freedom is actually a prison. So what can you do about it? First, adopt the rule of 3. Only consider the first 3 options you find, no more. Set your criteria before you start searching and stick to them. Give yourself a time limit, 30 minutes maximum, for any single decision. This forces you to act rather than endlessly deliberate. Second, embrace the satisficer mindset. 80% good is perfect. Perfection doesn't exist, and chasing it only wastes your life. Remember, done is better than perfect. Third, after you make a choice, commit to it. Don't look back. Delete your search history. Don't compare. Focus on what's good about what you chose. Train yourself to appreciate rather than regret. And finally, remember this truth. Happy people don't have more. They just know when they have enough. The paradox of choice reveals something profound about human nature. Freedom isn't about having infinite options. Real freedom is liberation from the burden of choosing. Research proves that reducing choices increases happiness. It seems impossible, but it's true. So simplify your life. Choose less. Live more. Service recovery paradox. Why companies that screw up win your heart? It's your 30th wedding anniversary. You made reservations 2 weeks ago, specifically requesting the table by the window, your wife's favorite spot. You arrive at the restaurant dressed in your best suit. She's wearing the dress you bought her last Christmas. You walk up to the host stand smiling. The host looks at his computer screen, clicks around, then looks up with apologetic eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have a reservation under your name." Your wife's face falls. The disappointment in her eyes cuts deeper than any knife. You feel like a complete failure. Your special night is ruined before it even began. Then the restaurant manager appears. "This is entirely our fault. Please follow me." He leads you to the VIP section you didn't even know existed. He brings out their most expensive wine. The dessert that arrives is something they don't even have on the menu. When the check comes, it's 70% off. Your wife is smiling now, squeezing your hand. 2 weeks later, you're recommending this restaurant to 5 different colleagues. Here's the twist: they just turned failure into victory. This is the service recovery paradox, and it reveals something counterintuitive about human psychology and customer satisfaction. A customer who experiences terrible service, followed by excellent recovery, can end up more satisfied than a customer who never had a problem at all. It seems backward, doesn't it? How can screwing up make someone happier than getting it right? But the logic is airtight. When service is perfect, you get what you expected. The emotional response is neutral. When service fails, you're disappointed and your expectations drop to rock bottom. But when recovery is excellent and exceeds those lowered expectations, you experience a wow moment. That emotional peak rises higher than your baseline would have been if everything had gone smoothly. However, this paradox only works under specific conditions. The mistake must be relatively minor and cannot repeat. The recovery must be fast and exceed expectations. And the empathy must be genuine, not performative. Let's walk through some real scenarios where this paradox either saves or destroys relationships and reputation. Imagine you're flying home for your father's funeral. You're already devastated, barely holding it together. The flight gets delayed 4 hours due to mechanical issues. You call your mother. "I'm not going to make it in time." You hear her crying on the other end of the line. The guilt crushes your chest until you can barely breathe. The airline agent says, "We apologize for the inconvenience," in a monotone voice. No compensation, no alternative flight arrangements, nothing. You arrive home 6 hours after your father has been buried. You never got to say goodbye. The result, you will never fly that airline again. You write a 1-star review. You warn everyone you know to avoid them. One failed recovery just cost them a lifetime customer and probably dozens more through negative word of mouth. Now contrast that with Southwest Airlines in the same situation. The same delay happens. But the employee looks you in the eye and says, "We understand this is an emergency. Let me see what we can do." They arrange a charter connection, upgrade you to first class, give you a $500 voucher, and call your family ahead of time to update them on your new arrival. You make it home just before your father passes. You're there to hold his hand in his final moments. The result? You fly Southwest for the rest of your life. You tell this story to everyone. One excellent recovery just earned them a customer for life and countless referrals. Or consider buying a new car. 1 week later, you discover an electrical problem. You call the dealership. You drove it off the lot. That's not our responsibility anymore. They won't budge. You argue. They hold firm. You end up paying $2,000 out of your own pocket to fix their mistake. When friends ask where you bought your car, you say, Stay away from that place. Result 10. Friends avoid that dealership. They just lost $400,000 in potential revenue over a $2,000 repair. Now contrast with a different dealership. Same electrical problem. This is our fault. We should have caught this during inspection. We'll fix it for free. They give you a loaner car while yours is being repaired. They throw in 3 years of free oil changes. They fill your gas tank. Result, you refer 8 people who buy cars there. You become a customer for life. One excellent recovery just turned a mistake into massive profit. Now let's bring this home literally. You forget your wife's birthday for the second time in 3 years. She doesn't say anything, but her eyes are red from crying. Your daughter asks, "Why is Mommy crying?" You feel like the worst human being on the planet. Response: A. You make excuses. "I've been busy with work. You understand?" Your wife goes silent. The distance between you grows. 6 months later, divorce papers arrive. Response B. You take full responsibility. "I hurt you. I'm deeply sorry." You cancel all meetings the next day. You plan a surprise weekend getaway. You write a 3-page handwritten letter about how much you love her. You buy the piece of jewelry she looked at 6 months ago. Result, your relationship becomes stronger than it was before the mistake. The recovery not only fixed the damage, it deepened the bond. So what's really happening psychologically? Expectation disconfirmation theory explains it perfectly. When performance falls below expectations, you're dissatisfied. When performance exceeds expectations, you're delighted. Recovery creates massive positive disconfirmation because it takes you from rock bottom to way above normal. The reciprocity principle is also at work. When a company goes above and beyond to fix their mistake, customers feel obligated to reciprocate with loyalty, positive reviews, and referrals. But perhaps most importantly, this builds trust in a way that perfection never can. Perfection doesn't test trust. Failure followed by exceptional recovery proves reliability. Actions speak louder than words. People remember how you made them feel, not the specific details of what happened. The best companies in the world understand this. Ritz-Carlton gives every employee $2,000 in discretionary spending to solve customer problems on the spot. Apple's Genius Bar replaces products with minimal questions asked. Zappos has legendary customer service built entirely on this principle. Amazon refunds without conditions. These companies know that mistakes are inevitable. What matters is the response. So how do you apply this? In business, empower frontline employees to make decisions immediately. Speed matters. Recovery needs to happen within an hour. Overcompensate slightly beyond the damage caused. Follow up after recovery to ensure satisfaction. In life, the same principles apply. In marriage, when you mess up, admit it, apologize sincerely, and do more than required to fix it. As a father, miss your kid's recital. Plan a special father-child day. In friendship cancel plans last minute, schedule something even better. At work, miss a deadline. Deliver exceptional quality ahead of schedule next time. The core principles are universal. Own the mistake without excuses. Act immediately without delay. Exceed expectations by adding value. Ensure it never happens again. The service recovery paradox teaches us something profound. Mistakes don't kill you. Indifference does. How you recover defines you more than the mistake itself. People remember feelings, not events. Trust is built when someone is vulnerable and isn't let down. So don't fear mistakes. Fear failing to fix them. Simpson's paradox. When the same data proves two opposite truths, your oncologist looks down at your medical file, then back at you. Treatment A has a 93% success rate. Treatment B only has 87%. The choice seems obvious. You select treatment. A feeling confident you've made the right decision based on solid data. 6 months later, the treatment isn't working. You're getting worse. You seek a second opinion. The new doctor reviews your case and looks puzzled. Why didn't you choose treatment B for men in your demographic? It's 30% more effective. You stare at him confused. But the data said, he cuts you off. The data lied to you. Here's the twist: mathematics just deceived both doctors and you. This is Simpson's paradox, and it reveals one of the most dangerous truths about statistics. A trend that appears in separate groups of data can disappear or even reverse when those groups are combined. It sounds impossible, but it happens all the time, and the consequences can be devastating. Let's start with the classic example from UC Berkeley. Overall, admission rates showed that 44% of male applicants were admitted, while only 35% of female applicants got in. This looked like clear evidence of gender discrimination. But when researchers examined each department individually, they discovered something shocking. Women had higher admission rates than men in almost every single department. How could this be? The answer lay in where people applied. Women disproportionately applied to highly competitive departments with low overall admission rates like English and psychology. Men more often applied to less competitive departments with higher admission rates like engineering and chemistry. When you combined all the data together, it created the illusion of discrimination that didn't actually exist within any individual department. Now let's make this concrete with a simpler example. Treatment A succeeds 90% of the time with 10 severe cases and 50% of the time with 90 mild cases. That gives you an overall success rate of 54%. Treatment B succeeds 80% of the time with 90 severe cases and 40% of the time with 10 mild cases. That's an overall success rate of 76%. So treatment B looks better overall. But here's the paradox in both the severe cases and the mild cases. Treatment A performs better. Your brain wants to rebel against this. How can A be better in every category but worse overall? The answer is in how the cases are distributed. Treatment A was mostly used on easier cases, while treatment B was tested on harder ones. When you aggregate the data, you lose this critical context. Let's walk through some real scenarios where this paradox costs people money, health, and peace of mind. You're reviewing your retirement investment portfolio. You notice that Fund A lost to Fund B in every single quarter of the year. First quarter A lost 2%, B lost 1%. Second quarter A gained 3%, B gained 4%. Third quarter A gained 2%, B gained 3%. Fourth quarter A gained 5%, B gained 6%. The logic seems airtight. You should switch from Fund A to Fund B immediately. But when the year-end results come in, you're stunned. Fund A gained 15% for the year. Fund B only gained 9%. How is this possible? The answer: Fund A had more money invested during the best performing quarters. When you weight the returns by the amount invested, the picture completely reverses. If you'd switched to Fund B based on the quarterly data, you'd have lost $60,000. That's not just money, that's 5 more years before you can retire. Or picture this medical nightmare. You're diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer. You read the research studies. Surgery has higher survival rates than radiation therapy. The data is clear, so you choose surgery. The operation leaves you with complications, erectile dysfunction, and urinary incontinence. Your quality of life plummets. A different specialist reviews your case months later and says, "For your stage and demographic group, radiation would have been more effective with fewer side effects." You pull up the same research study he's referencing. The overall data says surgery is better. But buried in the appendix, you find the subgroup analysis for your specific situation. Radiation had better outcomes. The study authors aggregated all the data together, hiding this crucial detail. The cost isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the quality of your remaining years. Now consider your career. You worked hard all year. Every single quarter, you were the top performer on your team. Quarter 1, you scored 95. Your colleagues scored 85. Quarter 2, you scored 92. They scored 88. Quarter 3, you scored 90. They scored 87. Quarter 4, you scored 93. They scored 86. You beat them every single time. The year-end review arrives. Your colleague receives a larger bonus. You're stunned. Your manager explains they worked on high-visibility strategic projects. You worked on essential but operational tasks. When the scores are weighted by project importance, your colleague wins. You were objectively better in every period, but the aggregation method reversed the outcome. The cost here is your motivation. You're now considering quitting. So what's really happening mathematically? The key is understanding that weighted averages behave differently than simple averages. Confounding variables, hidden factors that affect the outcome, can completely mask the truth. When you aggregate data from different groups, you lose crucial information. This is called aggregation bias, and it's everywhere. Here's why this is dangerous. News headlines only report aggregated data, never the detailed breakdown. Marketing teams exploit this paradox to manipulate perception. Government policies get built on misleading conclusions. Medical research publishes overall results without adequate subgroup analysis. In healthcare, clinical trials can be fatally flawed. In finance, investment performance gets manipulated to look better than it is. In politics, polling data gets misrepresented to push agendas. In business, companies massage their KPIs to make performance look better for shareholders. So how do you protect yourself from being deceived? First, develop critical thinking habits. Always ask, how was this data grouped? Demand subgroup analysis before making important decisions. Don't trust headlines, read the actual methodology section of any study. If something looks too good to be true, it probably is, and someone likely cherry-picked favorable data. Second, apply this to your life decisions. When your doctor recommends a treatment, ask, what are the outcomes for someone in my specific situation, not the average patient? When you're reviewing investment performance, ask, how did this perform for people in my situation and time horizon? When comparing yourself at work, compare yourself to people with similar contexts and constraints. Always remember, context is everything. Third, watch for red flag phrases. When someone says, research shows, immediately ask, which research? What population? When you hear 90% effective, ask, effective for whom? Under what conditions? When you read most people, ask, most people in which group? These questions cut through the statistical manipulation and get to the truth. Simpson's paradox warns us, numbers don't lie, but they can deceive. The truth lives in the details, not in the aggregated summary. A single statistic can support two completely opposite conclusions, depending on how you break it down. So, don't let anyone use statistics to fool you. Dig deeper, ask harder questions. Context is everything. Stockdale Paradox. The only way to survive hell, faith plus brutal truth. 1965. A fighter jet screams across the Vietnamese sky before a missile tears through its fuselage. Navy pilot James Stockdale ejects parachuting into enemy territory. He's captured immediately. For the next 8 years, he endures a prison camp where torture is routine and hope is a dangerous luxury. Some prisoners commit suicide by biting through their own tongues. Others go insane, screaming through the night until their voices shatter. But Stockdale survives. He returns home and eventually becomes an admiral. A journalist asks him, "Who didn't make it out?" Stockdale's answer stuns everyone, the optimists. Here's the twist. Optimism killed them, so pessimism saved people. Where's the logic in that? This is the Stockdale Paradox, and it reveals one of the most counterintuitive truths about human survival and resilience. To understand it, you need to hear Stockdale's full explanation. The optimists were the ones who said, "We'll be out by Christmas." Christmas came and went. They weren't released. Then they said, "We'll definitely be out by Easter." Easter came and went, still imprisoned. Thanksgiving then. "We'll be home for Thanksgiving." Thanksgiving passed. Their hearts broke under the weight of shattered expectations. They died of despair. What Stockdale discovered wasn't that optimism itself was fatal. It was that blind optimism. Optimism untethered from reality was a death sentence. His survival formula was something far more complex and paradoxical. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. Both at the same time. Hold unwavering faith in ultimate victory while simultaneously facing the harsh truth of your present situation. Here's the paradox. Hope alone leads to denial, and when reality crashes through that denial, you collapse. Reality alone leads to despair, and despair makes you quit. But hope plus reality creates the resilience to endure anything. Let's walk through some real scenarios where this paradox determines who survives and who doesn't. Picture sitting in an oncologist's office. The diagnosis is stage 3 lung cancer. Your wife and children are beside you, all of you crying. The optimist responds, 3 months and I'll be cured. He reads about miracle healings. He visualizes the tumor disappearing. 3 months pass. He's not cured, he's worse. Depression sets in. The will to fight evaporates. He stops treatment thinking, if it's not working, why bother? He dies within 6 months. The pessimist responds differently. I'm going to die. There's no hope. He refuses treatment from the start, believing everything is pointless anyway. He fulfills his own prophecy. He dies within 3 months. Now consider the Stockdale approach. This will be the longest battle of my life. I will fight and I will win. He researches the disease thoroughly, not denying how serious it is. He follows treatment with strict discipline. He prepares for a long war, not a quick victory. He celebrates every small win, a good scan a week without nausea. Result, 5 years later, he's walking his grandchildren to school. Now imagine financial devastation. You've worked at the same company for 25 years. It shuts down. You lose your job, your 401k savings, your house. You're sitting in a small rented apartment staring at your college diploma on the wall, wondering what went wrong. The optimist tells himself, 3 months from now, I'll be just as wealthy as before. He borrows money from friends to invest in get-rich-quick schemes. 3 months pass, he's lost more money. 6 months, his friends avoid his calls. 1 year later, he's completely bankrupt. The pessimist tells himself, I'm too old. My life is over. He stays home, doesn't look for work drinks every evening. 3 years later, he's alone, poor and sick. The Stockdale method looks different. This is the biggest crisis of my life. I don't know how long it will take, but I will get through it. He cuts spending drastically. He learns new skills, even coding in his 50s. He takes temporary work to survive. He rebuilds slowly. 3 years later, he has stable work, different but stable. 5 years later, he's consulting for startups, earning more than before. Consider one more scenario: marriage on the brink of collapse. After 30 years together, after raising 2 children who are now adults, your wife says, I want a divorce. You sit in your car, unable to face going inside. The optimist thinks, she'll forget about this by next week. He changes nothing. Next week, she moves her belongings out of the bedroom. 6 months later, divorce papers arrive. The pessimist thinks, it's over. There's no saving this. He gives up without trying. 3 months later, they're divorced. The Stockdale approach is harder. Our marriage is collapsing. This requires radical change. I don't know if it will work, but I'll do everything possible. Both partners enter therapy. He changes specific behaviors: listening instead of arguing, showing up instead of withdrawing. 2 years of hard work, many sleepless nights. But gradually, the relationship heals. 5 years later, they're stronger than ever, traveling together, rediscovering each other. So what's happening psychologically? The key is understanding cognitive dissonance, the ability to hold 2 contradictory beliefs simultaneously. Most people can't do this. They choose either hope or reality, never both. Stockdale held both at once. This is a hallmark of advanced intelligence and emotional maturity. Resilience research confirms this pattern. People with true resilience are realistic optimists. They acknowledge pain while believing in eventual success. They have a growth mindset, not yet, instead of never. From a leadership perspective, business researcher Jim Collins identified the Stockdale paradox as the defining characteristic of Level 5 leadership. Winston Churchill embodied this during World War II, telling Britain, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat, confronting brutal reality while simultaneously declaring, we shall never surrender, maintaining unwavering faith. From a neuroscience perspective, hope activates the prefrontal cortex, enabling planning and problem solving. Reality checking prevents the amygdala from hijacking your brain into panic. The balance between these creates optimal performance under pressure. So how do you apply this framework? Step 1. Confront the brutal facts. Write down the absolute worst-case scenario. No sugarcoating, no denial. Get specific numbers and timelines. For example, my retirement fund lost 40%. It will take 10 years to recover to previous levels. Step 2. Maintain unwavering faith. Define what victory means for you. Not return to how things were, but survive and grow. For example, I will retire well, but with Plan B. Step 3. Practice daily discipline. Morning review the brutal facts without flinching. Daytime work on solutions. Evening reaffirm your faith without surrendering to despair. Apply this across domains. Health crisis, understand the disease is serious. Believe treatment can work. Financial crisis. Acknowledge the debt, create a 3-year payoff plan. Relationship crisis. Accept the deep fracture, commit to rebuilding. Career crisis. Know your industry is changing. Believe you can adapt. The Stockdale paradox teaches us that both delusion and despair will kill you. The sweet spot is the tension between brutal reality and stubborn hope. This isn't toxic positivity. This isn't defeatism. This is something far more demanding and far more powerful. You cannot control the situation, but you can control your response. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose. Choose both stare directly into hell and never give up.